Okay, desert gardeners, we are going to talk. We are going to talk about how you can have a successful garden in the summer. Yes, even when it's 100 plus degrees. And I shouldn't even just say desert gardeners because it gets this hot other places too. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Shamira Benson, one part of Team Benson, and I have been gardening in the Phoenix, Arizona desert for at least 9 years at this point. And I come from a long line of desert gardeners with my grandmother, my mother, and then also on my father's side, farmers. They weren't in the desert, but they were also had a big garden. And then also ranchers too as well. So I have learned a thing or two about growing in the desert, and I want to share that with you guys. And I share that every single time I post a video, but I want to give you guys some exact tips on how I am successful at growing here in the desert. So let's get started. Tip number 1 is going to be to pick the right crops for the right times. Now, in the desert, you can pretty much grow all year long if you are picking the right crops. So things like if you want green leafy vegetables, yes, you can have all of your spinaches and your kales and your greens and all of that during the fall season. But during the summer, if you still want green leafy vegetables, you need to plant something that is going to be more suitable. This is my Malabar spinach. It is a thicker leaf, and it does have like a little bit more like mucilage or something like the stuff that's in okra. Not as slimy as okra, but it still does have that to it when you cook it. But you can easily just saute that out with a little bit of oil, and you can use that like a spinach. You can also eat it raw and eat it like on tacos, anything like that, in a salad that you want to do with it, but it still gives you those green leafy vegetables. You just now get them in the summer. You can also do the same thing with roselle. Amaranth is another thing that I typically have in my garden. I don't have those two in there right now, but both of them will provide you with green leafy vegetables. So the next thing is going to be to wall off your space. One of the reasons why I have a lot of success in my garden is because I garden in a tight little packed little space, and it is walled off by this brick fence here. So this brick, it's either brick or concrete. I think it's concrete. It's concrete blocks. They provide a lot of extra cooling actually to my garden. So when I combine them with the shade cloth, which is going to be tip number 3, when I bind them with the shade cloth and I water in the morning, it actually makes it more humid and cooler in here. So when I stand up, I feel that Arizona heat. When I'm sitting down here, it's a lot cooler and a lot more bearable. It also protects your garden from everything that's going to want to eat it, and it provides just an extra barrier between like the hot sun. So it can absorb a lot of heat during the winter and keep things a little bit warmer, and then it also surprisingly keeps things a little bit cooler, like I said, when you add the shade cloth to it. The next tip is going to be the shade cloth. Shade cloth in your garden and your vegetables reduces the heat by I would say at least 10 degrees, 10, sometimes 15 degrees, depending on the time of the year and if you just watered or not. It reduces the heat by a lot. So it still provides like that, the rays from the sun, so your plants can still photosynthesize, but you just don't get that unbearable heat on top of your plants. Now, yes, if the wind blows and that thing blows off, you're gonna get that Arizona sun just beaming right down on it. And you're gonna get things like sun skull and different things like that, but it reduces the heat. And if you can tack it on perfectly to where it's not it's not going to get blown off by the wind, then you'll be in good shape. The next thing is going to be to layer your garden. Start from the top and layer it down. So I have my Armenian cucumber over here. Let me show you my Armenian cucumber, and then some peppers, and then below it will also be like some beans. So I have 3 layers of protection, actually 4 if you count the shade cloth in between the Armenian cucumber and the peppers. The Armenian cucumber doesn't need any type of shade, and it actually can provide shade for the peppers that are right below it. And then the beans that I will put in underneath that will have that shade from the peppers, the shade cloth, and the Armenian cucumber. Now, not only is the Armenian cucumber helping the peppers, but the peppers are also in turn helping the Armenian cucumbers, because yes, the Armenian cucumbers can take that much sun because their roots are protected. right here. So the peppers are casting shade on the base of this Armenian cucumber. Same thing with my Chinese red lung noodle beans. That provides a little bit of cooling for that plant, and they're growing in a soil that is not super burning hot. So the fact that I have that layer of protection there, it's kind of like one is protecting the other and they're both protecting each other. So now we're going to talk soil. I have red wiggler worms. Now I get a lot of gardeners that say, where did you get those worms? Did they just show up in your garden? Are they earthworms? How do you get those worms? Where did they come from? No, they did not just show up in my garden. In fact, when I first started my garden, I went straight to PetSmart and I bought some worms that they said, here goes a bucket of worms. They were fishing worms or ones you feed to lizards. And I threw them in my garden and I never saw them again. I never saw a single earthworm again. Yes. That is because earthworms are not just rolling around in the desert. What you can have in the desert are red wiggler composting worms. They are worms that need to eat a lot. They eat way more than your regular like little earthworm, which is good because they have to get through this Arizona soil. So I raised my beds. All of my beds in my garden have either a little bit of a raise, like whether it's like 2 inches or 4 inches, or it's my metal Vago garden beds that are like solid, like almost 10 inches, 10 inches, to where it's up off the ground. I provided soil and food and all that kind of stuff. But before doing that and putting those beds and that soil on top, I dug down into the ground. I watered and dug, watered and dug, watered and dug, watered and dug. There's zero topsoil back here in my garden. There was zero kind of soil. It was literally just dirt. But that over time is turning into soil. So my plants actually do better over time because the roots can go further and further and further and further into the ground because I pre-dug it and I got composting worms. Those composting worms, they can survive this desert heat and this hot sun, but you also have to feed them. So you have to make sure that you are providing food for them down in that soil. So I still bury like food scraps, eggs, fish heads, all those different things get buried into my garden to feed them. But they poop out a lot of worm castings. And over time, they will turn that really hard soil that you have into something that's bearable underneath that spot that you have your raised bed on. And I bought them. I bought them from the Arizona Worm Farm here in Arizona. I like to purchase things from the state that I'm in just because I know that they can deal with this heat. But if you guys are in a different state, note that these are some Western hardcore worms. They can deal with the hot heat because that's where they were born, that's where they were raised. So they probably will like it a little bit better in your garden if your garden's only like 100 degrees. But they do provide a lot from the soil. They give this a lot back to the soil. You just have to remember that your garden is constantly going to be composting, and that's what you have to think about. So you're constantly going to be needing to add and feed your soil. Also remember that there are other living things in your soil other than worms. So yes, the worms are providing those worm castings and all that nutrients to your soil, but there's other things. There are centipedes in my soil, there are beetles in my soil, there are all different types of little insects that are in the soil and doing a job. They're all helping to compost, break down, and remember that not only is your worm poop good for you, but also their poop is good for you too. So, or good for your garden as well. So don't discount all the other things that are in the soil. Your soil should be a living ecosystem. It should be alive. It should look like live soil. It shouldn't look like a sandy mess. It should look like it is alive. So that's how you should treat it, like it is a living organism. So even when my garden, it has nothing on top of the soil, or no plants in there, which I try not to let that happen, but sometimes I do, especially if I'm composting. I bury things down in there for those living things to eat, and then also I give it a spritz of water. I also like to put ice and different things like that on top of it just to keep that soil cooled down. But a little spritz of water on top where you're not wasting a lot of water during the summer, and like so I'm not soaking it, but I'm burying food. This is the time that any of those empty beds that you see in my garden, they are working. They are eating and living and getting ready for the fall. Okay, the AC went off, so that was time for me and the phone to have a break. But the next thing I want to talk about is if you should till or do a no-till garden in the desert. So the thing about the desert is, yes, I don't like to completely till my garden, because I have so much life going on in my soil. Now, if you were to ask my grandmother when she was alive, she would say, till your garden, till your garden every fall before you get ready to plant it, and just kind of really till it up and get that airflow going into your garden. Now, me and her disagreed on the fact if we should completely till our garden, but we didn't disagree on the fact that there should be airflow into our garden. Because with this hot sun, it really bakes that first layer of soil. So no matter, even if you have mulch on it or anything like that, it's really gonna bake it on there. So one of the things that I do is I just take like a little dibbler, or this is a paint stick, and I just push it down into my garden beds like this. So I'm not tilling it, I'm just providing like little pockets. There's like little oxygen pockets that are in my soil. This one helps get the water down in there, because when it comes to that first layer of your soil being really baked on there, then it makes it kind of hydrophobic to where like the water just sits on top. And if you're in the desert, if you're going hiking after like a rain, you'll see this in the rain too, like on the mountain too, where like it's wet on the top, but underneath it, it's dry. And it just, then all that water gets absorbed by just the atmosphere. So you want to poke like little holes just so that water gets down in there. Now, having a layer of mulch is going to help just retain some of that water, but you still needed to go a little bit deeper. Now, I am against full tilling of my garden. I don't do that. And that is because, like I said, I have so much life source in my garden, and I don't want to stab it all like with like a full like rototiller. But those of you that have no-till gardens, please comment down below what you think and some of the techniques that you use, but just having a little dibbler or a stick to kind of poke holes in it is something that I use. Also, I don't pull my plants. I leave the plants in there, and I just cut the base when that plant dies back, because those roots and all the little holes that they're making also can provide some oxygen and space for water to get down into your garden. So that is another way that I kind of keep my garden with a little bit of airflow going into it. Now, the last thing I'm going to talk about, actually there's two more things. Second to the last thing I'm going to talk about is mulch. I kind of mentioned it before, but using some type of heavy mulch. I use wood chips in my garden a long time ago, and now that I try to keep everything that's in my garden, I use all of the dead plants. So those big things that I grow, like Malabar, or like the Malabar spinach, the Chinese red long noodle beans, the Armenian cucumbers, the beans, all of that, I use those leaves and those like sticks and kind of like, like little branches that they make and like vines as mulch for my garden. I do still have wood chips in my garden. I put bagged soil. I use the Kellogg's brand. That way it does leave like a bunch of like wood chips, and the compost that I get when I don't use compost from my own garden is from the AZ Worm Farm. That also leaves like some wood chips, because there is like little pieces of wood in there that the worms don't eat. I save all that. So I scoop it off at the top, because it'll create like a thick layer over time of the worms eating food, because I have composting worms. So over time, it'll create a thick layer that's too thick that you don't want to plant into. So you kind of scoop it off and save that. And then as you need it, then I just sprinkle that on new beds that need a little bit more mulch or anything like that. Or if we're having a really hot summer, which not every summer is going to be an extremely hot summer, but when we have that really hot summer, then put a thicker layer of that mulch on top. And the last thing I do is I grow a super organic garden, guys. I don't spray anything on this garden. I don't dust it with anything. I don't do anything. I use water to kind of control what's going on. If something gets badly infected, I just pull it out. And if there is like a bad infestation of something that I know it's just during that time, like if we're having a super hot week and I know there's probably going to be aphids because we're having a super hot week, I'll just spray them down with some water, like on top of the plants, spray them off, because they can't crawl back up. They need the ants to get back up to where they're going to go. So I just spray it off, and then knowing that if I provide a little bit extra shade for that, maybe pull the umbrella over to where that plant is, or provide a thicker, like maybe 2 layers of shade cloth to get it through that time, instead of having to pull the whole plant. But I do not spray anything on my garden, even organic things like neem oil. Neem oils, it's great, but I don't spray that on my plants, because we live in places that will fry things. So the last thing you want to do is spray oil on top of a plant that has to make it through 110 degrees in a couple of hours. So even if you're spraying it in the morning, even if you're spraying it at night, that oil is still going to be there because it's oil. And so it's going to burn your plants. I don't put any type of dusting powders or anything like that. I let the garden be what the garden's going to be. I learned to plant things at times that they grow best, because your plant is what's signaling for all of those things to come eat it. It signals the cabbage loopers, it signals the tomato hornworms, it signals the aphids, it signals all of those things, because that's the life cycle of the plant. So if you're planting your plants at a time that they're most happy, they won't signal for something to come and kill them. So that's another tip that you guys can use, but just grow yourselves a super organic garden. Okay guys, so that's all the tips that I have. I know that there are some amazing desert gardeners that follow my videos and that comment down below. So if you guys have tips that I missed, make sure you comment down below and help out your fellow desert gardeners or your new gardeners. And until next time, grow yourselves a garden, because even a small space can provide you with tons of food. Bye guys.